Hello, manic.mercurian here, and we're just about to experience a short but probably potent Mercury and Pisces transit in March of 2022. And this kind of just got me thinking about a topic which is a little bit nuanced and complex, but I think it would be kind of fun to delve into. And I don't know how to really even summarize it, but it's this connection between logic and emotion, between knowledge and wisdom, if that makes sense. And I think specifically it's the development of logic into emotion or knowledge into wisdom. Okay. And it's really interesting because there's actually some subtle but significant connections between Mercury and the element of water in astrology. And there's some other connections as well that are part of this theme that I wanted to talk about. Okay, so on the one hand, we typically think of Mercury, Mercury rules intellect, logic, it likes things to be calculated and everything to be known and, figured out, it likes details, it likes concrete things, things that can be measured. So we think in Western astrology of Mercury as not doing well in the water signs at all. It's very challenging there. Things become very confused and chaotic. Um, And so this is definitely something we experience with Mercury in Pisces. Mercury is in detriment and in fault in Pisces. It's unique. No other planet is both in detriment and in fault in the same sign, like Mercury is. So there's no question there. However, in Chinese astrology, Mercury is associated with the water element. So how could that be? How does that make sense? How and there's other cultures as well, other ancient cultures that would associate the planet of Mercury with the water element. Mercury or Hermes has connections to Enki in Sumerian astrology, and Enki had connections to the water element as well. Um, he was sort of in charge of the land, but also the sea to some extent as well. So there's actually a water connection with Mercury. I think Mercury does better in Scorpio than a lot of people would give it credit for, even Cancer to some extent. But the reason being is that the reason being is that there is a connection with Mercury and water. One connection is that if you, let's say you have a lot of Mercury energy, a lot of mercurial themes. If you delve into those nuances, if you delve into that information, one common theme would be to miss the forest for the trees, meaning that you're missing the bigger picture, the meaning, the purpose, because you're focusing on these little details. That is definitely a theme or there's a propensity there with mercurial people, transits, themes, etc. However, the more you delve into all those nuances and all the trees metaphorically, eventually you will understand the bigger picture from the ground up, from the as above, so below. So if you if you understand all these little themes and information, eventually that creates a worldview that you'll develop, if that makes sense. Okay, so in other words, another way of looking at it would be the more you gain information, the more knowledge that you have, the more wisdom you will eventually have. Maybe not right away. Memorizing a bunch of facts won't. That's definitely different from wisdom, and you won't have that worldview, that meaning, that spirituality at first. But I think with enough knowledge does develop spirituality and consciousness, awareness of the world, of the universe, etc. If that makes sense. And ultimately, water is maybe kind of the wisest element, the element that is most aware spiritually, metaphysically, and that's what Mercury wants is awareness. I know I'm kind of twisting things, I'm confusing things here, but Mercury, of course, is associated with Earth and air, like in Western astrology. I'm not going to deny that. Earth with like the physical observations, physical calculation, focus on physical matter. Air with the ideas and the imagination, the theorizations, theories, complex theories, Both of those together are Mercury, but then I think what those develop into is water. And that leads me to another connection, which is that astrology tells a story. Usually the signs will go in the same order: Aries, Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, etc. There are a couple cycles that go the reverse order, but most cycles go in the same direction. And so in that direction, you from earth and air, you literally go to water. And there's a reason why there's that chronology to it. Specifically from air to water, air leads into water. Air is the most emotionless element. It's the most kind of empty, detached, which is interesting because water is so full of emotion and so full of feeling. But that comes from air, though. Air develops into water. So, for instance, let's go from Gemini to Cancer. Gemini, with its curiosity, it wants to explore the world. It's basically trying to develop its own ego and its own sense of identity, but it's doing so through experiencing other people or other, things outside of itself. It's exploring. And so, especially, it's very curious socially. So, by being so socially curious and branching out to other people and being so experimental, trying different things, that leads to the emotionality of Cancer. That, or you could almost say, a lot of times there's a sort of crisis that happens at the end of Gemini. And so sometimes, it's through Gemini's curiosity and recklessness that comes um, the attitude of Cancer that is kind of melancholy, or it's going through some stuff. It's like processing some stuff, if that makes sense. It's feeling almost like a heavy weight of sorts. And again, that heavy weight is not just maybe because of some kind of chaos that developed. It's also because of the relationships that have formed. That's a common theme going from any air. All the air signs are interested in building relationships with other people. It's not necessarily always from an emotional standpoint. It's usually just curiosity. So it's maybe to access information, or it's for entertainment, just to interact with other people. But eventually that does lead to, inevitably deeper connections that conjure up emotion. So what I'm trying to illustrate is that the as detached and empty as, air the air element is, and Mercury can be, that attitude leads to emotion, leads to compassion, leads to wisdom, intuition, generally speaking, through this cycle of astrology anyway. Another connection would be Libra to Scorpio. This one is pretty straightforward, I think. Libra, by the time you get to Libra, Libra's really expanding outside of what is personal, going to the outside world, and specifically one-on-one partnerships, especially romantically. Libra is kind of like that first stage of courtship, which is kind of about appearances and about introductions, um, about that sort of initiation, but you're not initiating yourself in a kind of selfish way, like maybe Aries. You're initiating through someone else. You're initiating this relationship. Um, and what relationship is relating yourself to another person, comparing and contrasting, having that connection. So that's what Libra starts. It starts from maybe a place of um, desire. Venus ruled by Libra ruled by Venus. Libra desires other people, maybe for reasons that can be superficial at times, but that attraction itself, that desire, and that cerebral, that intellectual kind of desire to conversate with others and start those relationships, that leads to the intensity of Scorpio. And there's a crisis there as well. You know, typically the first stages of the relationship will be kind of light and playful, very, intellectual and fun. This is kind of Libra-y, but eventually there's some type of crisis where this new relationship is tested, and these people have to rely on one another in a, as a partnership, as a team. And this challenge, this crisis of sorts, will either make or break the relationship. So they will either realize that they cannot trust each other, they do not have as much in common as they thought, or they cannot rely on one another. So the Scorpio often represents the end, and there's a lot of emotion, feeling in that. There's a lot of wisdom that is gained. There's intuition that's gained from that, I think. But on the other hand, it can also be a binding event that, you know, through the trauma, both people have that shared trauma binds them, and they learn to count on each other, to rely on each other in times of hardship, and then that binds them together. See, I'm almost picturing them like a brand, branding them together in a way. So you can see I rambled a little bit, but you can see how the air leads to water. The intellectual curiosity, the intellectual desire leads to emotion. And then probably the most maybe vivid example would be Aquarius to Pisces. Aquarius, which is literally named Aquarius, which there's a clear water connection there, which confuses many people that are getting into astrology. Aquarius is not a water sign; it's an air sign. But the Aqua, the Aquarius, it is the water bearer. There is a water connection there, and I don't think a lot of people maybe know why there's that connection. Um, there's a few different interpretations of this. One interpretation was, in the Mediterranean, where Western astrology originated, um, Aquarius would initiate the spring rains. So there'd be like wind patterns, which would be Aquarius air, that would bring the spring rain that would eventually lead to Pisces. But there's a metaphorical connection there. Aquarius is air, it is like wind, so metaphorically that would be knowledge, information. It's very like informational sign, um, more cerebral, but through its intellectuality, through its understanding of abstract concepts in society in the far future, through that understanding comes the humanitarian aspect. If you have that knowledge and that wisdom, that leads to compassion. Because if you have the knowledge of the bigger picture, I think there's a natural feeling of obligation that you're either obligated to pass on that information, become a teacher of sorts, which is one manifestation of Aquarius, or to use that information to help build a better world, better future. That becomes kind of utopian, kind of idealistic. These are all elements of Aquarius. Aquarius also has connections like with the underdog. I think that's part of the seeing things holistically. Once you see things holistically, there's a kind of vague or detached empathy there. Because if you're understanding the whole picture, you're seeing the picture from everyone's side simultaneously. So then that leads you to this empathy for everyone and everything that is experienced by Pisces. Pisces, which pretty much loses its ego and melts into everything. Hopefully, I'm making sense. Let's see. That's pretty much what I wanted to say. And I know this is a topic which I don't. It's hard to summarize. It's hard to fit in a neat little package. But it's basically just the idea that knowledge leads to wisdom, if that makes sense. Wisdom, I feel like, it's not just information. It's spiritual almost, or it's soulful in a way. I think there's something powerful there. So let me know what you think. I don't know if that makes any sense at all. I mean, I know it makes sense, but it's hard to make it make sense. It's hard to articulate it. But let me know what you think, or if you kind of relate to this, or if you'd like to know more. Really, it's interesting. You can learn a lot from just looking at all the signs as a sequence, as a story, because that's what it is. All these are all just cycles. They're all cycles that we experience from a daily level, monthly level. There's cycles within cycles. So, anyway, that's all I wanted to say. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to reach out to me. Otherwise, thanks for watching, and I'll see you later.